She stood there, microphone in her face, hundreds of eyes under the stage lights. And I, the woman who built everything from nothing, was being demoted and fired publicly, as some kind of morale boost for the incompetent ones left behind. But they didn't know that with just a few clicks before I stepped off that stage, everything vanished as if it never existed. My name is Erin Calloway, and I've spent the last 15 years building things that matter. At 38, I'd climbed from junior software engineer to senior director of product development at Hexen Dynamics, not through schmoozing at happy hours or playing golf with the C-suite, but through pure, undeniable results. The office sprawled across the 32nd floor of a Manhattan high-rise, all glass walls and exposed brick, the kind of place that screamed innovation while quietly suffocating it. I arrived at 6:47 a.m. that Tuesday, like always. The floor was empty except for the night security and the faint hum of servers in the distance. I'd built Horizon Core from a sketch on a whiteboard to a $60 million AI platform that would reshape how enterprises handled predictive analytics. Every algorithm, every architecture decision, every pivot, they all traced back to my whiteboard, my late nights, my refusal to accept good enough. But Hexen had changed. What started as a scrappy startup where code quality mattered more than PowerPoint skills had mutated into something else entirely. The ping-pong tables and beer fridges remained, but they'd become props in an elaborate performance of company culture. Beneath the surface, a different game played out, one where technical excellence took a backseat to political maneuvering. The shift accelerated when Matt Delroy arrived 6 months ago. Our new CEO came from a Fortune 500 company that had perfected the art of failing upward. Mid-40s, with that specific brand of confidence that comes from never having built anything yourself. He spoke in TED Talk soundbites and believed his own LinkedIn posts about transformational leadership. I watched him systematically dismantle everything we'd built. Not the products, those still made money, but the culture, the meritocracy, the radical idea that the best ideas should win regardless of who pitched them. He called it evolving our organizational dynamics. I called it corporate cancer. The gender dynamics were never explicit. HR had trained everyone too well for that. Instead, it manifested in 1,000 microaggressions. The way Matt's eyes would glaze over when I spoke in meetings, only to light up when Brad from sales repeated my exact point 5 minutes later. The informal strategy sessions that happened at bars where I was never quite invited. The feedback that I needed to be less intense and more collaborative, while my male counterparts were praised for their passion and drive. I'd navigated it all before. This wasn't my first rodeo with insecure men in corner offices. But something about Matt felt different, more calculated. He wasn't just another executive threatened by competence, he was actively hunting it, marking targets for elimination. 3 weeks ago, my director of engineering, Sarah, was let go. Restructuring, they called it. Last week, James from my architecture team got reassigned to a dead-end project in our Seattle office, one by one. Anyone loyal to me, anyone who understood what we were really building, disappeared. The Horizon Core team meeting that morning included 5 new faces, Matt's imports from his previous company. They smiled too much and asked questions that revealed they'd never worked with distributed systems. But they knew how to nod at the right moments and pepper their sentences with whatever buzzwords Matt had tweeted that week. I should have seen it coming. Should have started playing politics, building alliances, documenting everything. But I was too busy actually working, too focused on delivering the platform that would secure Hexen's next $100 million in funding. That was my mistake. I thought being indispensable meant being valuable. I forgot that in corporate America. Being indispensable often means being a threat. The first sign came through my calendar. Monday morning. I opened Outlook to find 3 meetings marked strategic planning session that I hadn't been invited to. My assistant, Maria, looked uncomfortable when I asked about them. Mr. Delroy said they were just preliminary discussions, she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. By Wednesday, I discovered my key project updates had been forwarded to the leadership team with my name stripped from the subject line. The detailed analysis I'd spent the weekend preparing was now attributed to The product team. Generic. Faceless. Erasable? The server room incident should have been my wake-up call. I needed access to verify our disaster recovery protocols, routine stuff I'd done monthly for 3 years. But suddenly, my keycard wouldn't work. Security claimed it was a system glitch. But I saw the email on the guard's screen. Callaway, E, restricted access list. Then came the Thursday meeting that changed everything. I walked into conference room A to present the Horizon Core roadmap, only to find Matt already mid-presentation, my slides on the screen behind him. "Ah, Aaron," he said with that practiced smile. "We started a bit early. I've been walking the team through our new vision for the platform." Our vision. The words tasted like battery acid. I sat down and watched him butcher my architecture, misrepresent the technical dependencies, and promise impossible timelines to impress the board members dialing in from Singapore. When I tried to correct a critical error about our API structure, he held up a hand. "Let's take detailed questions offline, shall we? We need to keep the momentum going." The room laughed, polite. Corporate laughter that meant nothing and everything. After the meeting, I confronted him in the hallway. "Matt, that roadmap took my team 8 months to develop. You can't just..." "Your team." He tilted his head with manufactured confusion. "Aaron, we're all one team here. That's the Hexen way, isn't it? No silos, no kingdoms, just collaborative innovation." The gaslight burned bright enough to light up Manhattan. Over the next 2 weeks, the isolation campaign intensified. My direct reports started getting mysterious meeting invites during our one-on-ones. The Slack channels I'd created went quiet, then archived without notice. My name disappeared from the Horizon Core documentation, replaced with Product Development Team, or simply removed entirely. I found out about the leadership offsite from Instagram. Matt's story showing the entire C-suite at a resort in the Hamptons. Aligning on Q4 priorities. Priorities for my platform. Without me. The paranoia was the worst part. Every hushed conversation that stopped when I approached. Every email thread I wasn't copied on. Every quick sync between Matt and my team members. They all felt like betrayals in progress. But I couldn't prove anything. That was the genius of it. Death by 1,000 administrative cuts. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, forwarded emails, voice memos of conversations. My apartment became a war room, with printed timelines and organizational charts covering the walls like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But what was I going to do? Run to HR? The same HR that reported directly to Matt? The final straw came when I discovered they'd hired my replacement. Not officially, of course. Technically, Brandon Hayes was brought on as VP of Strategic Initiatives. But his LinkedIn showed a suspiciously similar background to mine, and his first meeting request was with my entire team. Without me? I sat in my office that night, watching the city lights blur through tears I refused to let fall. 15 years of my life, every breakthrough, every solved crisis, every weekend sacrificed on the altar of changing the world through technology. And for what? To be erased like a typo in someone else's success story? That's when I saw the email. All hands Hexen Inspire Day. A company-wide celebration of our achievements, featuring keynote presentations from leadership, mandatory attendance, live streamed to our remote offices globally. My name wasn't on the presenter list, but I had a feeling I'd be part of the show anyway. The grand ballroom at the Sheraton gleamed under theatrical lighting, transformed into a corporate temple for Hexen Inspire Day. 800 employees packed the space, with another 2,000 watching the live stream from offices in London, Singapore, and Sao Paulo. I sat in the third row, my laptop bag heavy on my shoulder, wearing my best black suit, armor for whatever was coming. Matt took the stage to thunderous applause, his presentation titled Embracing Change, the Next Chapter of Innovation. For 20 minutes, he painted a vision of Hexen's future that sounded suspiciously like the strategy deck I'd written last quarter, minus the technical accuracy and plus a heavy dose of corporate mysticism. Change isn't just about technology, he proclaimed, prowling the stage like a discount Steve Jobs. It's about having the courage to reimagine our teams, our processes, our very DNA as a company. My stomach turned to ice. Sometimes, he continued, his voice dropping to that fake intimate register. Leadership means making hard choices. It means recognizing when brilliant people have taken us as far as they can, and having the wisdom to bring in fresh perspectives. The spotlight found me before his finger did. Aaron, would you join me on stage? 800 heads turned. The livestream cameras swiveled. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me up the steps into the blinding light. The wireless mic appeared in my hand like a curse. Aaron Calloway, everyone, Matt announced, starting a round of applause that felt like a funeral dirge. One of Hexen's longest-serving leaders, the architect behind so many of our technical achievements. Past tense, I heard it even if nobody else did. Aaron has been instrumental in getting us to where we are today, he continued, positioning himself slightly in front of me, subtly claiming the spotlight. But as we enter this new phase of hypergrowth, we need to evolve our leadership structure to match our ambitions. The words came out smooth as poison. Effective immediately, Erin will be transitioning out of her role to pursue new opportunities. We're grateful for her contributions and wish her the very best in her future endeavors. The ballroom went silent. 800 people watched my professional execution in real time, broadcast in 4K to offices around the world. I stood there, mic in hand, expected to what? Thank him? Smile for the cameras? Play along with my own humiliation? Of course, Matt added, his hand hovering near my elbow like he might need to escort me off. We believe in celebrating our alumni. Aaron's dedication to Hexen has been... I found my voice. Unprecedented. I finished for him, leaning into the mic. Like the Horizon Core platform that currently processes 12 million transactions per day. The platform that secured our Series C funding. The platform that I built from nothing while others were still learning what API stands for. Matt's smile flickered. But you're right. Matt. I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. It's time for fresh perspectives. I'm sure Brandon Hayes will figure out the architecture eventually. The documentation should help, assuming anyone thought to maintain it. Security appeared at the stage edges. Of course they did. Thank you, Aaron, Matt said, reaching for the mic. Your passion has always been... My passion, I said, gripping the mic tighter. Built this company's entire technical infrastructure. My passion is the only reason Hexen exists as more than a PowerPoint deck and a ping-pong table. The security guard stepped onto the stage. I handed Matt the mic with a smile that could cut glass. Good luck with the fresh perspectives. The walk off that stage took forever and no time at all. Through the silent crowd, past faces I'd worked with for years. Their expressions ranging from shock to pity to careful neutrality. My keycard was already deactivated by the time I reached the exit. My laptop would be remotely wiped within the hour. But not the laptop in my bag, not my personal machine, still logged into Hexen systems through the development VPN I'd set up years ago. The one nobody else knew about because I'd built it during a weekend crisis when our primary connection failed. HR met me in the lobby with a banker's box of my things and a security escort to the parking garage. You have 1 hour to clear out, the HR director said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Your severance package details will be emailed by end of day. I sat in my car in the parking garage, hands shaking as I opened my personal laptop. The VPN connection held steady. My credentials still worked, for now. The Paragon Suite dashboard loaded, showing every project, every timeline, every piece of institutional knowledge for Horizon Core. 17 minutes. That's how long I estimated before they thought to revoke my development access. 17 minutes to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. My finger hovered over the trackpad as the engine idled, and my entire career burned down around me in a corporate ballroom 15 floors above. The parking garage fluorescence cast everything in sickly yellow as I stared at the Paragon Suite dashboard. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, surgeon steady. As I navigated through directories I'd organized with obsessive precision over the years, I didn't feel anger. That had burned out somewhere between the stage and the elevator. What remained was something colder, cleaner, clarity. They needed me gone but kept my work. They wanted my silence but staged my humiliation. They assumed I'd slink away, defeated and discarded like all the others before me. They assumed wrong. I opened the master repository first. 5 years of commits, branches, merge histories, the entire evolutionary tree of Horizon Core. Every bug fix at 3 a.m., every optimization that shaved milliseconds off response time, every elegant solution to impossible problems. My digital fingerprints were everywhere, even though they'd tried to erase my name. Delete repository. Confirm deletion. Purge backup history. Gone. Next. The project timelines. Gantt charts stretching 18 months into the future. Dependency mappings that showed exactly how each component connected. Critical path analyses that revealed which delays would cascade into catastrophe. Matt's fresh perspectives wouldn't even know where to begin. Select all. Delete. Empty trash. Confirm permanent deletion. The documentation wiki came next. Thousands of pages detailing every architectural decision, every API endpoint, every integration point with third-party services. The kind of tribal knowledge that takes years to accumulate and seconds to destroy. Batch delete. Override retention policy. Confirm. I worked methodically, not frantically. This wasn't sabotage. I wasn't inserting malicious code or corrupting databases. I was simply removing my contributions, taking back what was mine. They wanted me gone. Fine. All of me would be gone. The roadmap presentations, the technical specifications, the vendor integration guides, the disaster recovery procedures I'd written after the 2019 outage that nearly killed the company. Delete. 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 12 minutes in, I reached the crown jewel, the machine learning models. Not the trained models themselves, those were backed up across multiple servers. But the training configurations, the hyperparameter tuning logs, the data pipeline specifications that explained how to reproduce our results. Without them, the models were black boxes. Impressive. Functional black boxes that would work until they didn't. And then, no one would know how to fix them. I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then I removed every trace. An email notification popped up. IT security had noticed unusual activity on my account. 5 minutes left. Maybe less. I moved faster now, but still precisely. The test suites that validated new releases. The deployment scripts that prevented the kind of catastrophic failures that destroy customer trust. The integration documentation that explained how Horizon Core actually connected to Hexon's legacy systems, connections so complex it had taken me 6 months to design them. All of it disappearing into the digital void. With 2 minutes left, I opened the shared drive where I'd stored my personal notes, the ones I'd written for myself, never formally documented, containing the real secrets. Why certain architectural choices were made, which shortcuts were taken under deadline pressure, where the technical debt was hidden, which components would fail first under stress. These weren't company property. These were thoughts from my mind, typed by my fingers, on my own time. But they were the difference between Horizon Core being maintainable and being a beautiful disaster waiting to happen. I downloaded them to my personal laptop, then wiped them from Hexon's servers. 1 minute. I typed a final command, a script to clear all cache servers, forcing every system to rebuild from primary sources. Sources that no longer existed. It would take them hours just to realize what was missing, days to understand the full scope, and months, if ever, to rebuild it. Enter. The VPN connection terminated. Access revoked. I closed the laptop and placed it carefully in my bag. I didn't speed out of the parking garage. I didn't peel out with screeching tires. I drove slowly, carefully, observing every traffic law. Just another professional leaving another office building on another Tuesday afternoon in Manhattan. My phone buzzed incessantly. Calls from IT, from legal, from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off and dropped it in my purse. They could email their threats to the void I just created. At the first red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. No tears, no manic grin, just the face of a woman who'd learned that when someone burns your house down, sometimes the only response is to take the foundations with you when you leave. They wanted fresh perspectives. They were about to get the freshest perspective of all, starting from absolute zero, with no map, no guide, and no idea how deep the hole really went. The light turned green. I drove home to my apartment, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window, watching the city pulse with its usual indifferent rhythm. Somewhere in a conference room, panic was starting to bloom. Somewhere, Matt was learning that executing the architect doesn't transfer the architecture. I raised my glass to the window, toasting the Manhattan skyline and the crater I'd just left in Hexen's digital infrastructure. They'd wanted me gone. Their wish was granted, more completely than they'd ever imagined possible. The first article appeared in TechCrunch 3 weeks later. Hexen Dynamics delays major product launch amid technical difficulties. I read it over morning coffee, noting the careful corporate speak that danced around the real story. Unexpected technical challenges and strategic timeline adjustments meant they'd discovered the first layer of what was missing. By week 6, the headlines grew sharper. Hexen's stock drops 12% as Horizon Core platform faces extended delays. The quarterly earnings call transcript was a masterpiece of evasion. Matt used the word transitional 17 times and promised accelerated delivery once our newly enhanced team fully onboards. I monitored it all from my Brooklyn apartment, creating Google alerts for every key term, watching the slow-motion disaster unfold through press releases and leaked employee posts on Blind. I never commented, never liked, never left a trace, just watched. The lawsuit came on week 8. Hexen's legal team accused me of malicious destruction of proprietary information and corporate sabotage. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who laughed out loud on the phone. They're claiming you destroyed proprietary information that, according to their own documentation, you created. Good luck proving damages for losing something they can't even properly describe. Week 10 brought the first partner defection. Reuters. Microsoft pulls out of Hexen partnership, citing technical readiness concerns. The deal had been worth $40 million over 3 years. Without the Horizon Core integration specs, they couldn't even begin the pilot program. My former team started reaching out around week 12. Careful messages on LinkedIn, asking how I was doing, mentioning offhand that things were challenging at Hexen. Sarah, who'd been let go in Matt's first purge, was less subtle. Heard they brought in consultants from McKinsey to reverse engineer your work. The consultants quit after 2 weeks. The Bloomberg article in week 15 included a devastating quote from an anonymous investor. We funded Hexen based on their technical capabilities. Without Callaway's architecture, they're just another startup with a good sales team and bad fundamentals. By month 5, the implosion was complete. Hexen Dynamics announces strategic restructuring, lays off 30% of workforce. Matt's name was notably absent from the press release. His replacement, the former CTO who'd warned against firing me, was trying to salvage what remained. They called me, of course, first HR, then legal, then the new CEO himself. Would I consider consulting? Perhaps documenting some of the institutional knowledge that seemed to have been misplaced? The daily rate they offered was insulting, then reasonable, then astronomical. I never returned a single call. The financial press connected the dots by month 6. The $60 million delete key, how Hexen's firing of key technical talent led to corporate collapse. The article included a timeline mapping my departure to each subsequent failure. They'd even found former employees willing to go on record about the systematic purge of my team. The SEC investigation started in month 7. Turns out that when you lose critical technical infrastructure right before a major funding round, and you don't properly disclose it to investors, people get upset. Matt's LinkedIn showed he'd moved to a strategic advisory role at a no-name consulting firm. In other words, corporate exile. I watched their market cap evaporate from my laptop. the same one I'd used that day in the parking garage. From 300 million to 150 to barely staying listed, the Horizon Core platform never launched. The patents I'd filed, still in my name because HR never bothered with proper assignment paperwork, became worthless abstractions. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature on the importance of technical talent retention that used Hexen as its primary cautionary tale. They tried to reach me for comment. I didn't respond. Month 8 brought news that Hexen had been acquired for parts by a competitor. $50 million for a company once valued at 6 times that. The press release emphasized they were primarily interested in select customer relationships and sales infrastructure. No mention of the technology that had once been their crown jewel. The GitHub post-mortem became legendary in tech circles. Someone leaked the internal engineering report that tried to piece together what had been lost. 23 pages of missing components, broken dependencies, and critical documentation gaps. The top comment on Hacker News was brutal in its simplicity. They fired the person who knew how everything worked. Everything stopped working. Shocking. I never gloated, never posted about it, never gave interviews to the tech reporters who figured out my identity and filled my inbox with requests. The victory, if you could call it that, was entirely private. Late at night, I'd sometimes pull up the archived Hexen website on the Wayback Machine, looking at the team photos from before everything went wrong. My face was still there, frozen in time, smiling at a future that no longer existed. They'd wanted to erase me from the company's story. Instead, my absence became the story. Every failed deadline, every lost client, every plummeting metric traced back to that moment on stage when they decided I was expendable. The most beautiful part? I never had to say a word. The absence spoke louder than any accusation could have. They fired me for team morale and watched their entire team collapse into chaos. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you stop doing. The satisfaction never came. I'd expected it to taste like victory, but months after Hexen's collapse, I felt nothing but hollow. I'd won, technically. They'd lost everything while I'd lost. What? Just a job? The crushing weight in my chest suggested otherwise. My Brooklyn apartment became a prison of my own making. I'd saved enough to live comfortably for years, but comfort felt like another word for stagnation. I woke at 6:47 a.m. every day, muscle memory from a life that no longer existed. The code editor on my laptop sat unopened. Every time I tried to start a new project, my fingers hesitated over the keyboard, remembering how easily years of work could vanish. The nightmares were specific. Not about the firing. That scene had played out exactly as I'd imagined it might. Instead, I dreamed about the code itself. Lines of beautiful, elegant solutions I'd crafted over the years, now existing only in my memory. I'd wake up trying to recall a particular algorithm, panicking that I'd forgotten it, that it was truly gone forever. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, called it complicated grief. "You're mourning," she said during our 3rd session. "Not just the job, but the part of yourself you poured into it." I destroyed it, I told her. I deleted everything. "They destroyed it first," she corrected. "You just made it visible." But visibility didn't heal the wound. I'd scroll through LinkedIn, seeing former colleagues announce new positions, new projects, new beginnings. My profile remained frozen, ending with Senior Director of Product Development at Hexon Dynamics. I couldn't bring myself to update it. To add an end date would make it real in a way that even watching the company implode hadn't. The worst moments came when I'd solve problems in my head, elegant fixes for bugs that no longer existed in code that had been deleted. My brain, trained for 15 years to think in systems and solutions, couldn't stop running. But now it was like an engine revving in neutral, all that power going nowhere. Sarah called one evening, 6 months after the collapse. She'd landed at a startup in Boston, building something new in the biotech space. "They could use someone like you," she said carefully. "If you're ready." Ready. As if healing from this kind of wound followed a timeline. as if there was a clear demarcation between broken and whole. I'm not sure I can do it again, I admitted, the words scraping my throat. Build something that someone else can just take away. Then build something they can't take, Sarah said. Build something that's yours. But ownership felt like an illusion now. Everything I'd built at Hexen had felt like mine until the moment it wasn't. The architecture, the solutions, the late nights and early mornings, all of it had been ripped away with a few words on a stage. I started running. First, just around the block, then longer routes through Prospect Park. Running was simple, 1 foot, then the other. No dependencies, no documentation, no stakeholders, just movement and breath and the burn in my lungs that felt more real than any satisfaction from revenge. On a particularly cold morning run, I passed a startup incubator with a now leasing sign. I stopped, staring at the empty space through the window, raw concrete floors, exposed beams, possibility waiting to be shaped. The idea came unbidden. What if I built something that couldn't be deleted? Not because of technical safeguards, but because it existed beyond any single company's servers. I thought about all the brilliant engineers I'd known who'd been purged, pushed out, made to feel worthless by people who couldn't understand their value. The knowledge that disappeared with them, the innovations that died in corporate power plays. My phone buzzed. Another recruiter, another senior position at another company that would eventually do what Hexen did. I deleted it without reading. But this time, the deletion felt different. Not like destruction, but like clearing space. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new repository. Not for a company or a product, but for an idea. A platform for preserving technical knowledge, owned by the community that created it. Decentralized, open source, impossible to erase because it would exist everywhere and nowhere at once. The first line of code felt like breaking through ice. The second came easier. By dawn, I'd built the skeleton of something new. Something mine, but also everyone's. The ghosts of Hexen still haunted me. They probably always would. But for the first time in months, I felt the stirring of something beyond anger or grief or hollow victory. Purpose. Maybe that's what they'd really taken from me on that stage. Not just a job or a title, but the sense that my work mattered. And maybe that's what I'd taken back, not through deletion or destruction, but through the simple act of starting to build again. The sunrise painted my apartment walls gold as I typed. And for the first time since that day in the parking garage, my hands were perfectly steady. 1 year later, I stood in a small conference room in Seattle, pitching to 3 engineers who'd been laid off from Amazon. My startup, Codex Collective, had 12 employees and a mission that would have sounded insane to the Aaron who'd worn power suits and played corporate politics. We built tools for developers to own their knowledge, not their code. Companies would always claim that. But the patterns, the solutions, the hard-won wisdom that lived in their heads. We created encrypted, portable portfolios that traveled with engineers from job to job. No company could delete what they'd learned. I'd incorporated under a different name, Callahan. Close enough to feel real, different enough to stay off the radar of anyone Googling the Hexen story. The tech press had moved on to newer scandals, fresher collapses. Hexen was just another cautionary tale in an industry full of them. My CFO, Marcus, knocked and entered. The Series A term sheet just came through, $8 million at a $30 million valuation. I nodded, feeling oddly detached from the number. Once, I'd have celebrated. Now, I knew how quickly millions could evaporate. Also, Marcus added, someone from the Wall Street Journal called. They're doing a follow-up piece on corporate knowledge retention and wanted to interview our CEO about our platform. Tell them we're too busy building to do interviews, I said. It was true, but also not. I simply had no interest in connecting the dots for them, in becoming the protagonist of their narrative about revenge and redemption. Because that wasn't what this was. Codex Collective wasn't my revenge on Hexen. It was my love letter to every engineer who'd ever been told their documentation didn't matter. Every developer who'd been fired and watched their creations crumble without them. every builder who'd been erased from the story of what they'd built. We operated quietly, growing through word of mouth in engineering circles. Our users didn't know who I'd been, and I preferred it that way. Callahan was nobody special, just someone who understood the value of preserving knowledge. Late at night, I sometimes checked on Hexen, the domain now redirected to the company that had acquired their assets. Matt Delroy's LinkedIn showed he was exploring new opportunities. The developers who'd survived the layoffs had scattered across the industry, carrying stories of the collapse like shrapnel. I felt nothing when I looked at these remnants. No satisfaction, no anger, just a distant acknowledgement of something that had happened to someone I used to be. My phone buzzed with a Slack notification. Our lead engineer had figured out a solution to a problem we'd been wrestling with for weeks. She documented it meticulously in our internal knowledge base, not because policy required it, but because our culture celebrated the act of sharing what you knew. I smiled, remembering when I used to guard my knowledge jealously. Believing it made me indispensable, now I knew better. Real power wasn't in being irreplaceable, it was in making your knowledge immortal, in teaching others so well that your insights outlived your tenure. Walking home through Seattle's endless drizzle, I passed a bar where tech workers gathered to complain about their companies. Through the window, I could see the familiar gestures, the frustrated faces, the resignation of talented people trapped in broken systems. Part of me wanted to go in, to tell them they had more power than they realized, that companies needed them more than they needed companies, that their knowledge was their true equity, worth more than any stock option. But I kept walking. They'd figure it out, or they wouldn't. Either way. When they did, Codex Collective would be there. A quiet alternative to the cycle of building and burning that had almost destroyed me. My apartment was small but warm, with a view of the Sound. No prestigious Manhattan high-rise, no corner office with glass walls. Just a space that was mine, filled with code that no one could take away. I opened my laptop and began reviewing pull requests, losing myself in the simple pleasure of building something that mattered, not for the valuation or the press coverage or the empty validation of corporate titles. For the first time in my career, I was building for the right reason, because the world needed what we were creating, somewhere out there. Hexen's ghosts still haunted their data centers, broken systems crying out for documentation that no longer existed. But I didn't think about that anymore. I'd learned the most important lesson of my career from that day in the parking garage. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need revenge to find justice. Sometimes you just need to disappear and build something better where they'll never think to look. The city lights blurred in the rain as I typed, and I realized with quiet surprise that I was happy. Not the fierce, competitive happiness of my Hexen days, but something calmer, sustainable. I'd lost everything and found something better. The knowledge that I could build again, and again, and again. And this time, no one could stop me. Sometimes you don't need to be remembered. You just need to ensure they never forget the cost of forgetting you. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge and redemption, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? Let me know in the comments. Your stories and perspectives make this community special.